The Heat wrapped up their 6-game road trip with a tough loss in Indiana. Miami went 3-3 on the trip, but did it really answer any questions about this team's identity? We'll answer that and more on today's Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat, whether you're tuning in on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com, here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day. Got a great show for you today. We're going to recap the Pacers game, get to some of your listener questions, but first you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started. Also, your favorite podcast now has a newsletter introducing the Locked On Heat Daily Newsletter, one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com and start your day with the all-new, free Locked On Heat newsletter. Recording this after the Heat's 119-101 loss to the Pacers on Sunday night. The Heat split the two games against the Pacers on the road after winning on Friday night. Tyler Herro had 28 on Sunday. Bam had 24. Duncan Robinson added 20 points off the bench. But the Pacers, David, outscored the Heat in the paint 62-28. That's pretty much the game. What stood out to you in this one?
Yeah, a lot of breakdowns defensively, I think, led to those kind of easier looks there. Miami seemed like they were just one step or two behind on their defensive rotations. There was moments there where they were as sharp as could be, especially when they were utilizing their zone defense. But eventually, whether it was Miles Turner stretching the floor, Tyrese Halliburton catching fire late in the game, TJ McConnell and his mid-range wizardry, it just seemed like there was always somebody who would just hit a shot. And, you know, Miami didn't do themselves any favors, turning the balls over pretty frequently, not hitting shots of their own, especially in the first half. They just looked bad. It looked like they were ready to wrap it up. It was a 6-game road trip, and you could tell that it was a 6-game road trip. They were quite done. I don't know what kind of energy they'll muster before their matchup against Philadelphia on Monday night. They don't have a lot of time to kind of rehash what went wrong on tonight's game, but they just didn't look like they were engaged. They were a step slower. Their best defensive player, Haywood Highsmith, just couldn't hit a shot, so he wasn't really playable either. It was just a combination of different factors, none of which really helped Miami's case out.
You know, Miles Turner had a pretty quiet game on Friday night. He goes off for 34 points on Sunday night, and a lot of that was damage done in the paint. Pascal Siakam was really efficient, 23 points on 9 of 11 shooting, most of his work coming in the paint before he fouls out with like 3-4 minutes left in the fourth quarter. But you're right. Like, the Heat just didn't have an answer for them defensively. And maybe it is just sort of, it was a 6-game trip. We're at the last stage here. We got the first one in Indiana. Would it be the worst thing in the world, like, if we came out of this with a split? No, I don't think so. And no Jimmy Butler in this game. We should probably mention that right off the top. He was questionable as of sort of Saturday evening. And people thought, okay, maybe he can kind of get upgraded to probable and be available for this one. Then was ruled out on Sunday morning. So the expectation is that he will be able to play on Monday night, maybe give Miami a little bit of a boost on that second night of a back-to-back. But without having Jimmy Butler in there, it did, and missing his fourth straight game, essentially. I don't know. I think I'm with you. It looked like they were just tired. There was not much juice there. And you know what? Credit to Tyler Herro. It was a rough first half for him shooting-wise, but he came alive in that fourth quarter, made like 3 triples in like the first 5 minutes of the fourth quarter. It was... And basically, single-handedly, again, lifted the Heat back into this game. And it was another good game for Bam, who we'll talk about later. But Tyler Herro's fourth quarter was great, but it didn't really feel like anybody else had much of a spark.
No, I mean, you got the occasional bucket from Duncan. You pointed out that he had a big game, and Bam was okay. I think the numbers seem a little overly inflated. They didn't feel like impactful minutes or, in fact, impactful production. It was basically Tyler. You know, if there's sort of an encouraging sign, too, is that we've seen this in a number of games where he's capable of catching fire, and he's, as John Crotty pointed out, as Eric Spoelstra said, he's very ignitable, and we've seen that ignition a lot more of late, where he's feeling it. And I don't know if it's just the overall hot shooting from 3-point range that's kind of translating into an overall sense of confidence, because he's just letting it fly. But we've seen for a couple of occasions now where he just catches these real heaters where he's just like, you know what? Anybody in front of me, it doesn't matter. From wherever I'm shooting from, it doesn't matter. I'm going to let it fly. You made the comparison, and I know a lot of people might not have agreed with it, but it was just Steph Curry like when there's just these moments there where he just catches fire and he's just like, you know what? I'm Steph Curry. I just reminded myself, and I can shoot from anywhere and I can do whatever I want to. And Herro kind of has that same level of confidence too. So that
my
is
favorite part about
it
was most of Miami's fourth quarter offense was this 3-man game between Duncan Robinson, Tyler Herro, and Bam Adebayo. And that was a lot of their offense on Friday night, and it worked so well. And they obviously went back to it on Sunday, where it would be Tyler or Duncan Robinson basically running split cuts off the ball, Bam handling it. Again, very Warriors. Like if Bam's the Draymond in that Draymond spot, right, and you've got Klay Thompson and Steph Curry running off of each other's screens, it's not new. Like they just pulled that off the Steve Kerr playbook, and that's fine because you have your two best shooters out there and a playmaking big. Like that makes a lot of sense. And they were running that over and over and over again on Friday to a lot of success. And Bam was the beneficiary of that with 30-plus points on Friday night. Duncan and Tyler had pretty good games in that game too. And in this game, it felt like Indiana was pressed up against it a little bit more. They were ready to switch it. They were just anticipating it, which should be, the expectation after you've seen it for a whole night and you get the film on it and everything like that. So they go to it again in the fourth quarter in this game, over and over and over again, and they can't really score out of it. And then finally, Tyler Herro just says, you know what, enough with this stupid 3-man game and your fancy split cuts, and Bam handle the ball. He grabs the ball on the inbound, right, brings it up, pulls up from 30 feet, drains it. He's like, how about that for some offense? And then what does he do on the next possession? Does the same exact thing. He's like, enough with your split cuts and your fancy playbook. I'm just going to rise up and take the shot, drills it again. And that's the most fun part about Tyler Herro, when he just kind of crumbles up the game plan, throws it in the recycling bin, and he's like, you know what, let me just take this over. And you're exactly right, David. It feels like he's doing that every night now for Miami, especially with Jimmy Butler out. There's no question he's been Miami's best offensive player this season. He's maybe been their best player for the balance of the season until Bam's kind of gotten started here. If there is something encouraging to take away from this game, it's Tyler Herro, and then maybe if there's something encouraging taken away from this series in Indiana, it's Bam breaking out a little bit here.
That's fair. Now, I asked you this before we started recording. Are you more or encouraged or discouraged following the 6-game road trip? Because we talked about what this road trip, the importance of it, the significance, that it was season defining, that Miami had to find their identity, and of course they lost Jimmy, and so already they were behind the 8 ball. Wind up 3-3 overall with some good wins, a tough loss in Detroit, tough loss in Phoenix, where, they could have just as easily gone 5-1. And I know you can't play the what if games. That's not the actual record, but they could have done something a little bit more significant. I think between tonight's loss, which was a bad one, and then Denver, those were really the worst games there of the series, but they could have won a couple here and there. But what were your overall thoughts? Do you think that they showed something that Miami can continue to build off moving forward?
Yes and no, right? Like, I'm on one hand, like if you would have said before, hey, here's the schedule, a bunch of tough teams on the schedule. Also, you're going to lose Jimmy Butler as soon as it starts. Essentially, you're not going to have him for 90% of this road trip. I would have been like, well, that sucks. The Heat season's over. Forget it. Like, just that's kind of what my response would have been. But considering that they did go
2-4, 2-4 in this road.
Yeah, they went 2-4. It would have been nice if they could have gone 3-3 and then improved their record to 500. They would have been 6-6 had they won this game. Instead, they dropped to 5-7.
All right.
I think I'm more encouraged by this team being fine. And when I say fine, I mean they're just going to be a fine basketball team. I don't think they're going to look like a contender maybe at any point during this regular season, barring some sort of major shakeup move or something that we don't really anticipate happening here. Yeah. But I think they'll be a fine playoff caliber team in the Eastern Conference. I feel better about that now than I did before the road trip, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know that they're outright bad. They're too good to be bad, but they're just too bad. Right. They're too bad to be good either.
They're too bad. So they're just good.
Yeah. They're right there. They're a perfectly middling team, unfortunately, and it's just they're getting some good performances. But Bam's breakout, we'll talk about a little bit later. Tyler certainly, Duncan coming off the schneid, he's been fantastic. If Jimmy comes back and he is as active and engaged as we hope he might be moving forward, maybe that could mean a reduction in minutes for some other players that aren't contributing a lot. And I don't want to throw anybody under the bus necessarily, but you know who they are. And that being the case, you have the foundation of what could be a solid rotation. You got some good minutes from Haywood Highsmith. He's shown some real promise as a defensive player ever since kind of having his breakout against Phoenix, against Kevin Durant, and then playing well against Anthony Edwards, et cetera. So he's had some really positive minutes. Nico coming off the bench has been a nice spark as well. Unfortunately, Jaime Jaquez looks like he rolled his ankles. I probably wouldn't expect him, to play against Philadelphia. Probably won't play. Luckily for Miami, they've got a 5-day layoff after their return to Miami. So they play in Philadelphia on Monday, and then they kind of take off the rest of the week. So that gives him a nice chance to recover, hopefully.
Has Bam Adebayo finally snapped out of his slump? We'll drill down into that a little bit more coming up next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Listen, we've all got people in our lives that mean something to us. And you know what? I think this month is all about showing gratitude. You're right. It's Thanksgiving. It's a holiday a lot of people celebrate. And as such, you want to show gratitude to a lot of people in your lives. Maybe you want to show gratitude to somebody you don't show gratitude enough, which is yourself. It's sometimes hard to remind yourselves that we're trying our best and to make sense of everything that's going on. Look, the world is a very difficult place for a lot of people, and we're juggling a lot of different things, and you never know what somebody's thinking or feeling behind the calm facade. But here's a reminder to send some thanks to the people in your life, including yourself. And one of the things that helps you kind of remember to appreciate yourself more is therapy. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, then maybe you should give BetterHelp a try, because it's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, it's flexible, and it's suited to your schedule. So just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched up with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA today, and you get 10% off your first month. That's 10% off, but only when you visit BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen of the day. The best way to support the show is to like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. Bam Adebayo has broken out here a little bit over these last two games. 24 points in this game. He had 30 points against Indiana on Friday night in that win on 10 of 17 shooting. And then game before that in Detroit, though a loss, he had 20 points. So this is now 20 or more points in the last three games. This is after basically starting the season averaging fewer than 20 points per game, right? Yeah. And so I think the breakout is happening, right? He shot 9 of 18, so 50% in this game. He was at 59% on Friday night, 61.5% against Detroit. So that percentage is coming up too. So this is not just a case of Bam getting the ball more, even though he is, but it's also a case of, hey, that shot is finally falling. You and I talked about this late last week, kind of drilling into the numbers, and we said, you know what? Some of these numbers are bad, but he didn't suddenly just become a poor pick and roll finisher. He didn't suddenly just become like one of the worst, post up guys in the NBA. Like some of this stuff is just going to kind of get back to a certain level. And I think we're starting to see that reversion of the mean now. David, what do you think?
Well, I think he hates Miles Turner, and two, I think that 3-point shot is falling. So I think those two are certainly factors. I think you combine those, and he's going to look to be more aggressive. He went 2 of 4 tonight. He went 2 of 3 in the previous game. So clearly he's 5. I'm sorry,
last 5 games. 5 of 8 in the last 3 games.
Yeah. So the 3-point shot is being incorporated at what we expected it to be. He had shied away from it. He didn't look aggressive. He looked like he had the ball out on the perimeter and just wasn't quite sure what to do with it. So I think things are normalizing a little bit. He's feeling a little bit more comfortable. And you'd expect that to be the case without Jimmy Butler in the lineup. Like somebody's going to take up the scoring load, and that falls, and as well as it should, on Bam's shoulders. Like he has to realize Tyler can only do so much. I've got to be able to supplement him. We shouldn't be asking about this in Bam and year 8 of his career, but I think it was an adjustment period between everything that's going on with the offense and the tweaks here and there, and just kind of trying to find his place. But at the same time, now that he's got this opportunity, he feels more comfortable. I'm not prepared to say that things are going to be back to normal or they're going to be better than they were, but I think things are normalizing to a certain degree.
Yeah, I think part of this too is Eric Spoelstra saying, "Hey, look, I need to figure out ways to get him in his spots a little bit more and figure things out." And I think especially these last 2 games in Indiana, I think we saw that, right? I wrote about this for All You Can Heat on Saturday morning or something, and one of the things that stood out to me in that Friday night game, and it was the same thing in this Sunday loss, is running a little bit more of that side pick and roll stuff for Bam, where he can kind of get when you're running it off to the side there, it kind of puts the defense at an angle. It spreads the floor a little bit more because you're putting 3-point shooters on the other side of the floor. So you just got to stretch the defense a little bit more. And they're running it with Duncan Robinson or Tyler Herro being the main creator. A lot of times it's Duncan. And so Bam gets that ball and he catches it on that short roll right around that free throw line, his sweet spot. And I thought on Friday night, he did a really good job of just letting it go. Just, hey, don't even think, catch the ball, not even a dribble, catch the ball,
Right.
let it fly. Take one half step in and let that thing go. And he scored a lot out of that side pick and roll, which was sort of a new thing into the offense. We saw a little bit of that tonight in this game. Again, Indiana was ready for it, as they should have been. But then we saw that 3-man game that we were talking about in the first segment kind of develop in that fourth quarter. And so they're trying to use Bam, especially in those screens with smaller players and him handling the ball a lot too, at least to initiate an offense, just to kind of create some space around him. And they're also, I think, empowering Bam to say, look, it's a 5-out offense, but not for you, right? Get to your sweet spot, get into the paint. Just don't take the long 2-pointers, which has never been Bam's thing. He's never been like a long 2-pointer guy. He's always wanted to kind of be in those non-restricted area paint touches. And I think Eric Spoelstra said, hey, those are okay. Like those 2-pointers in the paint, maybe if you can get to the rim, even better. We're going to design some sets for you. That's great. But if it's the free throw line jumper, that's still okay. That's still in our wheelhouse. That's fine for this offense. And I think something clicked, and maybe it was just having that literal conversation, perhaps. Maybe it was something like that behind the scenes, where you just see Bam taking that shot more now, because at the beginning of the year, he was letting those shots go. He wasn't taking those shots.
Maybe it's a chicken and the egg thing, but how much of Bam's quote unquote resurgence do you think is tied to Duncan's quote unquote resurgence? You know, like Duncan playing so well. I know the 2-man game has been so effective, particularly in that first win in Indiana. But I just, with Duncan continuing to space the floor and being such a dangerous weapon, we've known for a long time now that synergy, that partnership has always worked well in terms of the offense. How much of Duncan's ability to kind of score consistently helps Bam feel more comfortable as an offensive player?
It's a great point. It's got to be a factor, right? Like put Bam out there with the guys that he plays well with, and they're playing well too. Like he's gonna play off of them and
Find a way to flourish. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So that's a great point. Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. I think there's a lot going on to help get Bam involved. And by the way, you should. And maybe some people will push back. It's like, you shouldn't have to do this much work to get Bam involved and all this stuff. And I'm like, they're not working to get Bam involved. They're just going back to what worked, right? Like letting him shoot the shot from his sweet spot. That's not work. That's actually doing less work. It's just, you know what? Forget it. Just do whatever you want to do. That's less work, right? It's just kind of going back to what it is that he's doing well. The other thing I will say that I want to see more of going forward is early offense. And this will be interesting to see when Jimmy Butler comes back, because he's not an early offense guy. But at the same time, his usage rating is in a Heat 10-year low, so he doesn't really have control of the offense anymore the way that he used to. And some of that is probably by choice, and that's okay. I think, okay, we don't have to cater to Jimmy Butler's kind of pace anymore. That doesn't matter to us. Tyler Herro, Terry Rozier, Bam Adebayo, Nikola Jovic, like these are the guys bringing the ball up now. Duncan Robinson, like Josh Richardson, early offense, and get it to Bam early. Get it to Bam early in the offense so that he could just kind of, in semi-transition, if he's got to step on a guy, it's kind of like I'm watching watching the Miami Dolphins game today, and one of the things I noticed with Tua back is like, okay, now we have this like motion stuff, and Tyreek Hill being able to kind of cut across behind the line of scrimmage, motion, and he's got a little bit of a running start, and then gets into his route, and then he's got that breaking route, and then he gets to it, and Tua finds him, and it's just like, it's rinse and repeat. They're so used to it. And with Bam, I think you can do something similar where it's just like, yeah, just get this guy moving a little bit before you even get into the play, and then just kind of hit him with that pocket pass, let him get into that sweet spot at the free throw line, and then that could be rinse repeat. I just want to see more of that.
It's a great point. I'm curious to see if there's any kind of bumps in trying to reincorporate Jimmy, because it feels like we've talked about it in the first game following his absence, that Miami's pace looked different, their ability to move the ball, the kind of passing that we hadn't seen for most of the year. It looked a little stagnant. And does Tyler and Bam and everyone else kind of just feel more comfortable saying, you know what, this is the kind of style of offense that we'd like to play, and not necessarily going to Jimmy as much? Does Jimmy kind of demand the ball and say, no, we're going to slow things down. I want to be able to walk it up. I want to be able to lead the offense or be the initiator, the connector, the engine on offense. These are all kinds of questions that I'm not sure we have clarity for. My feeling is that Jimmy doesn't mind taking a step back, but usually that still involves him having the ball in his hands and being the primary engine and playmaker for somebody else. That's always been a part of his game, and it certainly has been in Miami. But that requires him to still have a high usage, have him have the possession of the ball, etc.
At least in the fourth quarter, right? And
yes,
so maybe you're
but
not
it's not
seeing...
hasn't been just in the fourth quarter. That's the whole thing. It's been
Right.
pretty consistent.
And then, so, no, it's a great question, because if Jimmy Butler's in this game and Miami is struggling offensively to start the fourth quarter the way they were, does Jimmy say, you know what, let me just take over? And then you don't get that moment from Tyler Herro, those back-to-back three-pointers and that stuff. And maybe, by the way, the Heat win this game if Jimmy Butler's out there, right? And maybe you didn't need the Tyler Herro moment necessarily. If Jimmy Butler's out there, maybe you're not getting this little Bam resurgence here. It's, 3 straight games with 20 or more points. I don't know. And again, what's good for one player might not be the best thing for the team, right? Maybe, obviously, right. I think having Jimmy Butler out there would be better for the team, but maybe it's a good thing that Bam kind of got going here and Tyler's kind of gotten on a roll here, so that when Jimmy Butler does come back, he has a better idea of where his spots are now at 35 years old, 34 years old, whatever he is. So, I don't know. It's a great point, though. It'll be because you're going to have to get him involved here a little bit. Also, I mean, it's a second night of back-to-back, so maybe not everybody plays. I don't know. Even though Jimmy's really the one that kind of gets the maintenance treatment here. So I do expect everybody who's available and healthy to play, because that's sort of been the theme here. But we do have some more listener questions to get to, including maybe some lineup changes. A question of, hey, Kel'el Ware didn't play in this game. Why not? We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need, all in the place to place live bets on the NFL. It's so great. It's so convenient. Let's say you're watching a game and maybe there's a lull in the game, maybe it's halftime or whatever. You get a hunch in the middle of it. You want to check out the latest stats. Maybe you want to view live play-by-play from around the league. Well, you can do that and so much more. All on the same page.
I'm sorry, not to interrupt, but they already got a spread on the Dolphins-Patriots game for next weekend. You want to guess what the Dolphins, what the spread is?
Fins up 7.
7.5. Yeah.
Nice. All right, cool. Good guess. All right. Well, you can do that all on the same page where you place your bets, but only when you visit FanDuel.com and join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet, but only when you visit FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. The best way to support the show, hit that subscribe button on YouTube, like the videos, comment, let us know what you think about Miami's road trip. Are you more encouraged, less encouraged after this 6-game trip about the Miami Heat? Let us know in the comment section on YouTube. Also, you could follow us on your favorite podcast app. 5-star ratings are always appreciated over there. Let's get to some questions. We're going to start off with our Locked On Heat Insider community. Of course, you can always find the link to join that community in the show notes, where you get first dibs at asking these mailbag questions. It is free for 14 days and it goes to $4.99 a month after that. Not only do you get first dibs at mailbags, but you get exclusive content from me and David. You get exclusive reporting, exclusive commentary on rumors before the trade deadline, and a lot more. But let's get to this first question. Why are the Heat usually losing the rebounding battle, and how important is it? How can they improve it? So the Heat in this game against the Pacers were out-rebounded 45-38. The Heat have not been historically a good rebounding team, and this season they've been even worse. They've at least gotten a big portion of the defensive rebounds available. They're not a good offensive rebounding team, basically haven't been since Bam Adebayo has been starting at center. But defensively, they usually get the job done, and they're basically they've fallen to sort of middle of the pack in defensive rebounding rate, and that has been a problem for them this year. So what do you think is going on?
I think it's an undersized roster, basically. I mean, Kevin
Love undersized last year.
Yeah, I know. I don't know. Maybe I can't really seem to understand. I don't think it's by nature of anything they're doing different defensively. A lot of zone defense. I think their numbers have been better of late. I don't have anything, unfortunately, to prove this. I wish I could, because I feel like they've been going to their zone defense a little bit more. It feels like they're being a little bit more active in terms of trying to pull down rebounds. At the same time, they were clearly out-rebounded tonight, as you pointed out. So it doesn't necessarily match up. So I'm not sure. I don't know if it's just players playing out of place, or it's just, without Jimmy there, maybe they're, again, a smaller group than they have been historically. I haven't really seen anything in particular in terms of their rebounding. I know it's important for them to continue to try and be more active, and I think Tyler's numbers are down as a rebounder. He's always been a great rebounder for his position and size. I don't think he's been as good as he has in years past.
Well, I think there's a few things happening, but I'll just say this comes down to availability. I mean, Kevin Love wasn't even available for the start of this season, and he was one of Miami's better defensive rebounders last year as Bam's backup. Bam's rebounding is still very good. When he's on the court, Miami's rebounding is still really good. It's when Bam comes off the court that everything kind of falls apart from a rebounding rate perspective. But with Kevin Love back, I think I'm with you, David. I don't have the data right in front of me, but they have actually moved up to 15th in defensive rebounding rate, where I think they were 17th or 18th before. So that makes sense. You get Kevin Love back and your rebounding goes up. The Heat actually went without a backup center for the most part in this game, and Kevin Love only played like 11 and a half minutes. Nikola Jovic was mostly the backup center, playing 31 minutes. So that's a reason why I think they were out-rebounded in this game in particular. But if, I don't know, when Jimmy Butler comes back, is Kevin Love still in the starting lineup? I think that's a big question, right? Is it going to be Haywood Highsmith and Jimmy Butler, or is it going to be Jimmy Butler and Kevin Love with Highsmith coming off the bench again? If they bring Kevin Love off the bench as the backup center, I think you could see that rebounding rate go back up a little bit more. And Jimmy Butler, too. He's a very good rebounder. And so not having him for 4 games is kind of a blow also, because you just get that much more undersized. Next question. A little too late for getting Tyler Herro involved or him being aggressive? Does Eric Spoelstra need to put more of an emphasis on getting Herro going earlier? What do you think?
No, I don't think so. I think Tyler's certainly comfortable looking for his shot at any point in time. I just think, as we pointed out earlier, that the shots weren't falling in the first half. So I don't know that he wasn't necessarily aggressive. I mean, maybe not as many field goal attempts, but they were defending him well. They kind of tried to do everything they could to limit his looks and everything else. I don't know that they could have done anything else. Like at that point, it seemed like Terry, was a beneficiary. He got a lot of open looks, and he just wasn't able to knock those down. So I don't know that my Spoelstra or the team could have done anything differently to get Tyler more involved or active, other than, hopefully he just hits his shots. At least not from what I noticed. Maybe upon a rewatch, I could see something a little differently. But I think, he's got the ball in his hands. He's doing everything he can. Credit Indiana, they did a really good job of defending him in the first half, and he didn't hit some of shots. But when, as we pointed out, when he wants it and he's got it going, he's going to take the shot, and there's nothing anybody can really stop him. So.
And that's a fourth quarter thing, right? It's cool when Tyler Herro does that in the fourth quarter when things stall out. But if he comes out guns blazing in the first quarter, not looking to pass, then you just end up with Cam Thomas in Brooklyn. You're like, this is kind of cool with the numbers and everything, but you're not impacting winning even a little bit. So you don't want him going Cam Thomas, Jordan Poole. You want Tyler Herro to say, you know what? Let me try to get some guys involved. Let me lean into my playmaking a little bit. And I do think that it's been an initiative from the Heat early in these games to get Bam involved, and as it should be. Get Bam involved when the second unit comes in. Draw up some stuff for Niko Jovic. Draw up some stuff for Jaime Jaquez before he rolls an ankle. All these other things. You got to kind of taste a lot of different things from the menu before you decide which entree you're going to go with, right? And in this game, you had to go with the Tyler Herro entree, and it almost worked. It
always comes out of food for you.
It really does.
A food comparison.
Cody writes in, Alec Burks had his 5th straight DNP-CD after tonight's game. His ability to stretch the floor as a true 3-and-D player would be beneficial to gritty games like tonight. But Josh Richardson has seemingly taken those minutes. Would the Heat benefit from giving those minutes to Burks instead of shaking up the rotation a little? Especially in a gritty game like today's. Alec Burks over Josh Richardson. Do you think it's a good idea?
It's just... That's a tough question to answer. On the surface, I think so. I don't think that Josh has been, unfortunately, particularly good. I think he gambles a lot defensively, and it leads some of. I think a lot of those easy shots at the rim. And again, maybe this is just the eye test, and I don't have anything in terms of conclusive data to back this up. But it just feels like when he's on the perimeter and he's taking these gambles in terms of trying to force a steal, or he gives up space there, it's not even necessarily going for a trying to force a turnover. Sometimes he's just caught flat-footed and out of position, like he's just hedged in the wrong direction. And he kind of allows somebody to drive past him, and that allows for an easy open look at the rim that draws a help defender. And then all of a sudden you've got somebody maybe cutting along the baseline for an easy layup or dunk. It felt like there were a number of plays, and there have been over the course of the season while Josh has been playing, that have resulted in an easier look because of some poor defense on his part. And he's not doing much offensively either. Again, Alec Burks looked great in some games that he's played, and he's a competent veteran. I don't know. This is really not a great selection there. If I had to guess, okay, if I put on the spot here, I think I'd rather have Burks' offense, especially on a night like tonight when nobody else was really dialed up. And maybe you can get 8 to 10 good quality points from him. You might give up 6 or 7, but as long as he's kind of on the positive side of the ledger, as he has been for most of the season, I don't see why you wouldn't want to put him out there instead of just going with the guy that you feel comfortable with in Josh Richardson.
So I didn't even think Josh was that bad tonight. I think he had moments of good, moments of not so good. But he was a +1 in his 24 minutes. I don't know. Calling Alec Burks a 3-and-D player, for the record, is a stretch. That is a major stretch, I would say. He's not a whole lot of 3, right? This is one of those classic, go get a bucket, I'm going to dribble into a long 2-pointer, which has its value in the league, and you want guys
2.7 is not 3. He's right there in front of the line. Yeah.
And defense has never been Alec Burks' strong suit, even a little bit. So Josh Richardson is a better defender, right? If you're talking about 3-and-D, like Josh Richardson at least looks the part of a 3-and-D player, where Alec Burks doesn't. But to your point, it's slim pickings here. It's slim pickings. So yeah, maybe
no Pelle Larsson either.
And no Pelle Larsson. Like that would be more of, I think Pelle Larsson has outplayed both of them to start this season. And so maybe that's more of the answer. And I understand if you can't get to that point yet, where you have to at least give Josh Richardson some rope. He's the veteran, like you said. Spo trusts him. He's comfortable with him out there. Alec Burks, maybe he gets a chance if these Josh Richardson minutes go sideways. But then eventually maybe you kind of work your way towards Pelle Larsson. And that is a real thing. As a coach, you can't just say, I'm throwing the second-round rookie in here. Sorry, veterans who we paid this summer. You're out of the rotation. It's you got to manage that kind of stuff, right? You really do. Like it or not, that's the reality of coaching, and that's not just for Spo. Speaking of Spo, C2D2 writes in, Spo keeps playing Terry Rozier. He's so inefficient. He doesn't even play good defense. I think it's time for Rozier to come off the bench, and you can't keep playing him when he keeps missing shots. He's not a plus defender. Play Drew Smith or Highsmith at this point. Do you agree?
Yes.
I think we need to have a real conversation about moving Terry Rozier to the bench, where I actually think he could be pretty effective going up against second units and maybe being a little bit of a spark plug sort of sixth man. I think that could really work. But the guy, I don't think he's made a 3-pointer all season, right? It certainly doesn't feel like he has. Like not a standstill 3-pointer, maybe some step back sideways threes at the end of the clock. It's just he's in a shooting slump right now. He's never been a great efficient shooter. He's also not this bad. And so I think it's okay to say, you know what, until you break out of this slump, we're going to make things easier on you. You'll go against backups instead of starters. You're going to have the ball more in terms of being the leader on that second unit. Because the other thing here, too, is Terry Rozier was not running that offense. That thing that we talk about with that 3-man game, Duncan, Tyler, Bam, when they were running that, Terry Rozier was on the court, but he was parked in the corner on the other side of the floor. They are not running their offense through Terry Rozier anymore, and I think that's the right idea. But I think the next step might be, and this might be where Spo is working towards, is, all right, we're going to see what this offense looks like without him, but we're going to keep him on the floor for a little bit here, and then maybe we work our way towards, now it's time to come off the bench. We got Jimmy Butler back. He's going to need the ball. Let's take Terry Rozier out, and I do think you play Haywood Highsmith in those minutes instead, as a starter alongside Jimmy Butler.
Yeah, I mean,
and Duncan Robinson coming off the bench too, but playing 31 minutes, like he's their sixth man, for all intents and purposes right now. So, last thing here, Dragon on Twitter, we got one Twitter question writes in, why didn't Kel'el Ware play? What do you think?
Just don't think he's ready. I think he's had some minutes there. I just don't think the pace of the game and their undersized centers, as quick as they are, were to his benefit. If he was somebody a little bit slower, where maybe he could match up, but he doesn't necessarily have to close out as often. But given that Indiana likes to space the floor, I don't think it was the right matchup for him. I was surprised to see the Niko Jovic line up there with him as the quote-unquote center. So that was a little peculiar. But at the same time, given that you played Love as a starter, you had to go with somebody. And I just don't think Ware was ready for that particular matchup, which is why he didn't play much in either game. He only played, 3 minutes in the first game on Friday night, didn't play any minutes today. So I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, those 3 minutes that he played on Friday, the Heat were outscored by 5 in 3.5 minutes. That happened on Friday, so that's probably anyway, yeah. So you don't get to play on Sunday when you were that bad on Friday, and that's just it, and that's okay for a rookie to have to take those lumps, right? It's like, hey, you got to play well to get on the court. You're not going to just get minutes because you're a first round pick. You got to be good when you're out there. Nikola Jovic has experienced this now in his third year. He said, okay, you were starting, you weren't good enough, you're coming off the bench now. And like you said, he came off the bench essentially as their quote-unquote backup center. But
Right.
They basically played without a center because Indiana was playing without a center whenever Miles Turner wasn't on the court too, because they don't have any centers other than Miles Turner who are healthy. So that's what you do. You match up, and Nikola Jovic played well, I thought. Overall, you have 14 points, a couple rebounds, a couple assists, whatever. It wasn't his best game, wasn't his worst game. That'll do it for us today. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. We will be back Monday night with a recap, post-game reactions of Heat 76ers. Until then, have a great one.